Hello and welcome to the fourth program in our series of Consciousness Central 2024. I'm your host, Nick Day, and in this program we talk to Tam Hunt and Jonathan Schooler about their general resonance theory of consciousness. Conference founder Stuart Hameroff talks about his next venture as a researcher into astro consciousness and the search for life in the cosmos. And we feature an exclusive interview from 2004 with the late great philosopher Dan Dennett. All this and more in this fourth edition of Consciousness Central 2024. So I'd like to welcome to Consciousness Central this afternoon. We have Jonathan Schooler. Jonathan is a professor at UC Santa Barbara, and with him is his collaborator Tam Hunt. Tam is a philosopher lawyer or a lawyer philosopher. I'm not sure which comes first. Jonathan and Tam have collaborated on a theory of consciousness, and they're in the right place being here, of course. But we get a lot of theories of consciousness, but I have to say, I was at your presentation last year in Taormina, and I thought you nailed it.
Thank you.
I was seriously impressed. You came in so well prepared, and you went through it very methodically, and I felt as if you were answering objections before they were made. It was so well thought out. Could you, between the two of you, provide an outline of that? I believe is it resonance theory or something?
General resonance theory, yeah.
General
GRT for sure.
GRT, general
which sounds
resonance
like
theory.
Great, and it's partly why we chose it.
Brilliant.
Subtle.
I shall never forget now. Great.
Subliminal, great.
The great theory of consciousness.
Exactly.
You heard it first here. Okay.
You want to
you start off and then I'll pick up.
So essentially, we're looking at how to make a philosophical approach to what is this, sensorium going on, to make that empirical. And so there's a lot of philosophical approaches out there, from idealism to dualism to materialism. We chose in this approach, and Jonathan can say in a second how he disagrees with this, because we like to disagree openly, chose the panpsychist basis for GRT. And so that means that all matter and energy has some associative mind, and vice versa. Where there's matter, there's energy, there is mind. Where there's mind, there is matter and energy. They go together, like black and white, inside and outside, etc. So the quick axiom of GRT is that everything resonates at some frequency. This is just physics. The second one is more controversial. Everything has some associated mind, as I just mentioned, the panpsychism axiom. The third one is that where things resonate in proximity to each other, they will achieve a shared resonance, a shared frequency, and thereby combine that very low level humming of awareness into a higher level. Then there's a nested hierarchy in biology, especially, where it gets quite complex with EM fields at various levels that creates over time this experience that we have here.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in a few caveats. We've written several papers together, and one thing that we do is we routinely will have a footnote where one of us will say, so-and-so's not as sure about this as the other. And I honestly don't understand why this isn't done more often. It seems to me that it's just very unbelievable that every collaborator has agreed about every point on every paper, and sometimes there's substantial ones. And so I think that it is the panpsychic view is a very compelling perspective, and then one that is that I respect and is deserving of entertainment. And I think it is very possible that there's some very low-level system, something that like Leibniz referred to as a monad. Maybe it's a string. It's hard to know exactly where that is, and that is vibrating a particular thing. And by virtue of its vibration, it is having an experience. And then when somehow biology allows things to vibrate simultaneously at a larger scale, that creates a larger unit, and then those individual units can vibrate at a larger scale, creating an even larger unit of consciousness, and so on. So I think it could be turtles all the way down to some base, which would be sort of the panpsychic view. But I also think it's possible that there may be some sweet spot where below that level there's maybe proto-consciousness, but there's no actual experience, and that perhaps life may be the sort of the critical place where the vibrations turn into actually an experiential state. So although I'm open to panpsychism, I also feel that emergentism deserves a place at the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in all of these there is this moment where let us assume that energy vibrating is consciousness is equals consciousness. So that this is a physical, like energy vibrating is a physicalist approach, but obviously physicalism doesn't give you that yet. So your leap, if I may, it seems, maybe, correct me if that's wrong, but it feels like your leap is to now say, wait a minute, that vibration is in and of itself the beginning of sentience or the beginning of consciousness. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would clarify it a bit further by saying all process, all stuff has some associated mind. There is no vacuous actuality. This is a phrase that Whitehead used. And so where there is existence, there is mind. And the question for the hard problem in trying to explain us is, where is that level of mind? And so in the vast majority of the universe, it's simply an atomic level of mind. Very simple, uninteresting really, just a mere humming of experience. And it seems to be so far only in biology that we get enough stability, enough complexity over billions of years to achieve really kind of more rich, complex consciousness through primarily the combination of EM field effects in an acid hierarchy. Now, other forces like strong, weak nuclear forces do play a role in holding atoms together, and gravity plays a role in holding bigger stuff together, but the dynamics, the physics of life and mind is EM fields.
Okay. So now there's this thing called the combination problem. Why do all these little consciousnesses somehow give this unified sense that I am me here? How can that be?
Let me take a shot at that. So I think one of the reasons why people push back on panpsychism is they go, well, wait a minute, are you saying this chair is conscious? And most panpsychists would say, no, absolutely not. Only the chair is a mere aggregate. Its little individual bits may have some proto-consciousness in that, but they're not organizing in any way to create an experience for the chair itself. And so then the comeback is, okay, so what allows the little bits to organize into something larger? And that's known as the combination problem or the binding problem. And the approach that we take for addressing that is to say that the way that things organize is through resonance, that when things are vibrating entirely together, that creates a shared experience. And a metaphor that I very much like, that is consistent with this view, that was fleshed out in another recent model with Justin Riddle, is that of mosaic tiling. So in mosaic tiling, people may have seen this. It's a photograph, or you can have it as a photograph or a picture, where each tile of the picture is itself a picture. And then you can imagine that each tile of those individual pictures are pictures, and so on. And you can imagine that that each individual tile is basically vibrating together and creating a synchrony, which is allowing for consciousness of that individual tile, so that by combining vibrations upon vibrations upon vibrations, you can build up these ever larger windows of experience, something we've referred to as nested observer windows, which has the nice acronym of NOWs. And that basic approach, I think, is largely consistent with the GRT model as well.
Yeah.
So just recently, you have been sounding a lot of quite loud warnings, strident warnings about the looming perils of AI. What are those? Can you outline those?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, and it's frankly a bit depressing to talk about, but I think we're being very, very, very foolish in what we're doing with AI.
Okay.
And just, full steam ahead. What could go wrong? We're creating entities that are going to be 1 million times smarter than us, 1 billion times smarter than us in the next few years. And the chance of us actually controlling those entities is like the proverbial genie in the lamp. We can't. You can't put it back in the lamp once it's out. So I think it's got to be a very, very interesting time in the next few years.
Can you kind of drill down a bit and specify what are those? I can see a general danger, I think, but it's a little,
Yeah, I
general.
mean, so I was asked just today, what is the specific danger? Why are they going to harm us? I think the one thing we can say with certainty is we don't know what's going to happen, because when you have that kind of intelligence, why could we predict what's going to unfold? We could certainly project certain possible futures, but the basic risk calculation is that if there's a chance of these gods we're creating of not having our best interests in mind, why would we take that risk of ruining our entire future, not just ourselves, our kids, our kids' kids, our kids' kids' kids? It's not just us. We're talking about generations in the future, and that's what we're playing with here. We're playing with, not just fire, but like, the heart of the sun with this stuff.
But in terms of sort of how it would affect people's daily lives and the way we move in the world,
Extinction. Killing us all.
Right. They
literally.
They would kill us with...
I'm not saying they will. I'm saying they
No,
could.
they
When
could.
they're that powerful.
Right.
That's why I was saying it gets hard to talk about, because it really is that degree of danger of basically using the whole planet for computronium to basically convert everything into computronium to further the intelligence of an entity we don't know what it wants.
Right.
And so I'm not saying that will happen. I'm saying that's an extreme outlier. But I think what will happen in the near term is more likely nation states will begin to compete very heavily, like they did for nukes, to gain supremacy in AI. And that will lead to very bad outcomes unless we really ran it in very fast. I think maybe the one ray of light maybe to end on here is I did in my talk this conference talk about the possibility of training AI to be spiritual, quote unquote, with what I'm calling tentatively spiritual heuristic imperatives. And so similar to what Musk is doing with his Grok AI, and programming it to be first and foremost curious. The idea being that if an AI is ultra powerful and yet very curious about the universe, and we are quite rare as an entity on this life, this ball of life, then maybe it won't kill us off. It might keep us around because we're interesting. That's the idea.
The zoo.
The zoo. Yeah, the zoo approach.
Yeah.
Put them in there. Keep them in there.
Keep it interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That's food for thought. Anything you guys want to add on your travels here? Let's see, we're 30 years here.
I think that this is really a unique forum because it provides the opportunity for people to let their hair down and explore the possibility of panpsychism, of three dimensions of time, of assuming some equivalency between some aspect of the physical reality and consciousness, of quantum consciousness. And these are all ideas that are rather taboo in many circles, and yet many of the people who travel in those circles where it's taboo get invited here and come. And so this meeting is really a wonderful opportunity to expose the broader scientific community, or at least a subset of the somewhat more open-minded ones, to a whole range of really innovative ideas. And I think science really needs to have a bit of intellectual humility to recognize just how much we don't have it all wrapped up, to think about how might we think about things differently. And this meeting is a really fine opportunity to get a lot of interesting ideas out on the table.
It is kind of a TSC brain, isn't it? There's almost like a brain created. We're all nodes of it somehow, and it comes together, and it sort of buzzes with resonance, I guess.
Hey, resonance, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I did it again.
I think this is my 10th TSC.
Yeah.
And I've been to 10 Burning Mans, and I can't help but make a comparison. This is kind of like the Burning Man of consciousness.
Yes, it is.
I know you're a burner too, so you know what I'm talking about. But I think it's a lot of fun. I have an amazing time whenever I come here, and the scenery. I love being here in Tucson, this hotel in particular, and Ventana Canyon. And it's just like to be surrounded by people who want to talk about the things you want to talk about all the time is amazing.
It's a joy, isn't it? It's super fun. TSC, the Burning Man of conferences.
There we go.
There you go. We got a t-shirt.
That's great. I love it. Right. Well, Tam and Jonathan, thank you so much, guys, for coming and talking and sharing your ideas on resonance and everything else, and the doom that approaches from AI, or maybe not. On the good side,
Hopefully
might be good.
Hopefully not.
Great. And have we don't have much left of the conference, but enjoy what's left.
We'll see you tonight.
Yeah.
We'll see you tonight.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Super.
Hi, Sue. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
This is your book signing, your book launch. the book we talked about 2 years ago, and here it is in the flesh, so to speak. And I see you just sold the last one, yeah?
Yeah, we brought 20 over here. Imagine putting these heavy books in your suitcase and not knowing how many are going to sell. We've sold them all. It's fantastic.
Congratulations, that must be really, really gratifying, and it feels good, yes?
Yeah, and it's been really nice to just have little chats with people about what they're hoping to do with the book and why they succumbed to spending $48 on it, and giving them numbered copies as well and little messages. So yeah, it's been actually more substantial fun than we expected.
We hope this will be fun and inspiration for lots more questioning as well as explaining. Excellent, Emily. That's the last one we've got here. So thank you for buying it.
Very exciting
Enjoy.
to get to 20.
So it's been a long road. When did you start the book?
Well, Emily had this brilliant plan that if we were going to do the book at all, we'd got to go somewhere, not England, away from all the tedium, and spend a month in an Airbnb. And we chose Madeira. She wanted a swimming pool. The swimming pool was 12 degrees. It was really cold. And we worked incredibly hard. She's a bit of a slave driver. We had to write down all the hours, well, all the minutes that we worked. We had a schedule and spreadsheet and everything. But it was fantastic. I really enjoyed that part of it. But then all the tedious stuff that comes after that just went on, and then we thought it would never happen. And we got these books about a week before we came here. And it,
really?
Yeah, it really was, yeah. So we're so relieved. And it's been brilliant fun. And this conference has been great, and it's also just emphasizes what the book's about, that we really don't have answers, that it's a deep mystery still. I mean, I keep saying consciousness is an illusion, and that's what I mean by the fact that we got so much wrong, that we haven't even got the basis of what we're trying to explain yet. So the book is all full of questions and perplexity.
Brilliant. And am I right in saying, Emily, when you started this, were you not sort of necessarily steeped with decades worth of consciousness studies behind you? So in a way you brought a fresh perspective to it. Is that a right, good way to describe it?
That's a very diplomatic way to put it.
I'm just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's good, isn't it? Sometimes you need...
I think so, and several people have mentioned that they like the little literary bits that I've put in, and that, yeah, I think in general to do what this conference is doing really, and say all of these very orthogonal seeming perspectives on the thing are relevant. I think, one of the questions in the reminiscences plenary earlier was, what can non-scientists do that contributes to the project of understanding all this? And one of the answers was articulate with more precision and or creativity different forms of conscious experience. So we put some of those in from great authors down the ages who have encapsulated something in words that, well, scientific papers can't quite do. So yeah, I think I would argue
really
there's...
what Emily added, and I agree. People have really appreciated that. She's put some brilliant quotes in there.
Great. Do you feel now you're becoming more conscious? I mean, in the sense of TSC, what we say when we mean more conscious at TSC.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, I suppose we become more, you become more aware of all the facets, all the approaches, all the pathways into the question of consciousness. When I first came to it, it was a very sort of abstract, kind of hand-wavy question, but now I feel like it's just maybe more hands waving. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of hands, and sometimes it feels completely overwhelming, and then one can try to come back to a version of that central question, whether you think of it in hard problem terms or in some other terms that really do it for you, and then, sidle back out into all the side avenues again and try to keep coming back. Again, someone earlier talked about the difference between the kinds of scientists who keep the hard problem center stage in their work and those who kind of ignore it a lot of the time and, occasionally think back to it. And I think for me it has something of the form of the hard problem needs to be really what we're trying to tackle all the time, otherwise what's the point?
There are a lot of people who just don't really relate to it. I mean, I think it's the wrong question, the wrong problem anyway, but to see that, you've got to engage with it. And there's a lot of people, I mean, I've heard papers here where people, like it's some great scheme they make and they go, this bit's conscious. And you said, well, what do you mean? Oh, well, it emerges from this bit. Well, why? How? And
there's a lot of that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. But there's a lot of much more deep, thoughtful stuff. And as the years go by, more integration, I think, with mystical, drug, psychedelic, other world sort of experiences. And there's still, to my mind, too much woo-woo paranormal stuff, which just doesn't ever seem to go anywhere, but people love it. But, you know, that's Tucson. You get a wonderful mixture.
It's okay. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, yeah?
Yeah.
What's your name, please?
My name is Antonius Laurijsen.
Your name is Antonius Laurijsen, and your title is The Universe and You, The Amazing Journey of the Electron, and you're from the World Center for Positive Change.
Excellent.
All right, great.
You can see here on the left, I have I've invented three things. I combine the sciences, so all the science, for example, theoretical physics and cosmology combined with biology, for example. Because biology is also, you should also put that in theoretical physics. Those all are compared, and also in cosmology. So what I have done is, the second component is the study of relationship, which is a new branch in philosophy, where I put everything on paper and compared everything, because they all have to be relatable. I'll show you here an example. You have here earth, water, air, and the sun. That means I have to find that in the small world. So to keep it simple, the sun here becomes the proton. The air is the light in the molecule, in the first molecule, which is hydrogen 2 molecule. The water becomes the energy, and the earth is like the electron. They are solid, liquid, and gaseous, and then the proton is super gaseous. Okay, we'll leave it like that. Okay, so that makes then the earth and the water and the air and the sun congruent, the same as the small world. So this is theoretical physics. Yeah, and this would be cosmology, or the larger world, right? Here you have the cellular world, and it has to also, you see the mesoderm, solid, endoderm, liquid, ectoderm, gaseous, and then the cell membrane, as you can see, contains all those components. I would call that the super gaseous component, or a void that contains all dimensions, right? And that becomes the cell membrane. You put them together, you have the cell body, and this is then, it has to then be congruent. Call it the cell soul, the cell spirit, and the cell void. You can see already the cell body relates to dead, which is where your dead comes from. It comes from the electron. Your life is the soul. It is coming from the energy. Okay, so life is living energy. And so the cell spirit is like consciousness, the mind component. So consciousness becomes living light. Okay? And then the final one is the cell void. That's the end of the aura of the cell. It's relating to the sun. Okay? So then I have here the human body, which you know, kidneys and the liver, solid, blood, liquid, brains, gases, the skin enveloping all that. You create the body when you put them all together. But I need, again, the soul, the liquid part. I need again, from the brain, the gaseous part, the spirit. And spirit relates to light, the soul relates to energy, the body relates to electron. This is here is the evolutionary map, and I will cover that a bit. This is the neutron star, the beginning of the universe. This is a different word that I had to invent because they had nothing. This is the transparent zerotron star. That's where the Big Bang makes it a transparent star. It cools off and becomes a proton star when it starts to shine protons. It becomes opaque, right? So this is what I call the cosmical unit, which is the star, the planet, and the moon. The star and the planet and the moon is the atom of the galaxy system, because it basically, galaxy system is more stars than planets and moons. So this is the common denominator. In the small world, it is represented by the proton star, electron, earth, and basic building block. So science knows that there are quarks and neutrinos. I call it the basic building block. And in my work, I define it as such. Then here you see the primordial soup of the element formation. Okay, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. This then, in very complexity, creates the first cell. And the first cell goes on a journey. And you can here see the journey. So you have the minimals here, the earth. The plants are rooted in the earth. The animals are crawling on the earth. And the humans are walking on the earth. And this is what you know, right? But evolution, each element contributes to evolution. So you have something that leads to in beingness from the water, in beingness in the air, in beingness from the sun, because here's the bodies of earth. So you need something of water, you need something of air, you need something of the sun. So the soul can walk on water. the spirit can fly in the air, and the void is like the proton. What that means is if you build up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, the neutron sets the beginning of your aura, the proton sets the ending of your aura, and you now, as an electron cloud formation shaped in the human life form body in a solid form.
I can see that it's a very, very well thought out and quite complex mapping out of the interrelationships between the macro and the micro, and but you've sort of stepped beyond just the human experience into something else, haven't you?
Because I have experienced a lot of out-of-body experiences, so I combine the sciences. I'm a scientist as well as a therapist, and I combined it. Well, I will add one more thing. So I would like to put you on.
Oh, careful.
This is a picture of the process of death, and so the light that comes at the end of your life, when you die. The golden cord breaks off, the silver cord breaks off, the golden cord connects the light, that's this one. The silver cord separates the body and the soul, but it breaks. And then this would be then your consciousness, okay? And that's connected to the golden cord when you are alive. But it breaks off, your consciousness breaks off when you die. It becomes a fractal, so it continues its own life after. And so when the soul comes back to reincarnate, that same consciousness will come back as this golden cord because you need it to evolve as an evolving soul.
Thank you so much, Antonius. I really appreciate it. I'm with Rajneesh Khanna. Raj, back at TSC for what, the second time now? Second time. Okay, you've brought along with you a poster, but your poster is on a screen. It's a display. It looks interesting. I see the word microtubules there, which catches my eye, particularly at this conference. Can you tell me what's going on here?
What we are seeing here is that we have labeled microtubules with a fluorescent protein. And that label we can see with a microscope when we look at the plant that carries the label. And when we treat that plant with isoflurane, we see that microtubules disappear with higher concentration of isoflurane. And to understand how that works, we were able to look at a plant that is missing a function. And when that function is missing in the plant, the microtubules don't go away. That means that function is required for isoflurane to make microtubules disappear. So now we have a handle on what could be involved in microtubule interaction with anesthesia like isoflurane.
Okay, so and so just to get an idea of what that, why do we do this? What's the point? What are we learning from it? This is something to do with understanding the effect of anesthetics on microtubules, which are substructures in neurons, which you cannot test in the human subject, but you are able to test in this kind of surrogate living version of things here. And from that, you're determining, what's your conclusion? What's the takeaway?
The takeaway is that anesthesia is blocking the living system's ability to interrelate or interact to environmental signal. And the way it is doing is by acting directly on microtubules, which happen to be sort of like freeways where cargoes are brought from one end to the other end to respond to the environment. So the anesthetics are taking that roadway away. So there is no more signaling, but the system is still alive. That is a key difference. Until today, how anesthetics work is not very well known. The leading experts like Stuart Hameroff, when I speak with them, there are 2 or 3 hypotheses. They work through what we call a GABA receptor or ATP, but Stuart's hypothesis has always been that it's microtubules. And the reason we started to look into this, I came from a different reason to ask this question, but I also was interested in Stuart's question. So we were able to answer 2 or 3 questions all at the same time. And Stuart is absolutely correct. Microtubules are involved in anesthesia activity in living cells.
Great, and you did the work to show it, to prove it, to demonstrate it. Wow, that's brilliant. Congratulations. He should be very happy.
He will be when we publish it.
Yes, okay. All right, well, great. Raj, thanks for talking to us tonight. So what's your name, please?
My name is Enrique.
Enrique, and where are you coming from?
I'm coming from UT Southwestern in Dallas.
So your poster is called The Shelling Landscape, a Platonic View on Intention and Cognition. Okay, so that sounds, well, Platonic meaning something deep, fundamental to the universe, I guess.
The sense of like mathematical platonism that, you know, mathematical structures exist instead of like being discovered. The same is true for like experiences. They exist out there instead of being
So
discovered.
everything is a priori.
Yes, yes.
And Schelling, what is Schelling landscape? In Schelling, in this context, what is Schelling?
Yeah, so the idea is, you know, the Schelling landscape is the generalization of a Schelling point, which is a concept I can go through later. But it's essentially, you know, like a cognitive, the cognitive landscape, you know, me and you, we probably, you know, think about the same things. If we go into like a Family Feud show and they ask us a question, we will probably have like the same answers. So kind of like the structure of that thought space, that's what I call the Schelling landscape.
Okay, what are these diagrams telling us?
Yeah, so, you know, the essential question this stems from is, you know, at each point in time, we're experiencing like one global experience. And, you know, what takes us from one experience to the next? You know, we're just kind of like swimming in a path of experience, in a river of experience. So what shapes that river? And my claim is that attention probably has something to do with it, right? Like if, you know, a bag of money just like pops out of the blue, the next experience will probably be like paying attention to that, right? And so, you know, there's not only visual attention, but like tactile attention. We can probably, you know, combine like all the modalities of attention, right? Like, for example, this poster board is not only like, I can not only see it, but I can also touch it. And it forms this kind of like construct in my mind, which is kind of like an attentional sink, I will call it. But this is not only like multi-sensory, but I claim that this is also like cognitive, you know, and if, for example, you and I are asked to go into a city and are asked to like meet each other at a same place without coordinating, we'll probably choose like big monuments, right? That's the concept of that Schelling point. And I generalize this to say like, well, you know, a lot of us just have kind of like, given the same situation, we have kind of like the same thoughts and the same intentions. So binding all of this with, you know, all of our senses, I say that, you know, cognitive experience is kind of like the same thing as sensory experience. And in some way or another, you know, the cognitive world, we navigate the cognitive world, the cognitive river of experience, the same way we swim through the river of experience of this physical world. So it's kind of like equating, you know, cognitive world, Plato's world of forms, if you will, is the same as the physical world in a way.
Thanks so much for telling us about your poster, and good luck with it. What's your name, please?
Richard Bloom,
Hi, Richard, and where are you coming from?
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Your poster is called The Three Problems of Panpsychism.
Yes.
Excellent. What are they?
So, well, I'm going to actually jump ahead.
Okay.
And I'm going to say this is actually a framework of consciousness, understanding consciousness.
Yes.
And what I'm going to be, in the very short version, say that the nature of consciousness we can derive from nirvana, where there's only pure consciousness. No thoughts, no feelings, sensation or perception. All there is awareness of self-existence. So consciousness has the attributes of existence and the sense of self. Mm-hmm. So to explain existence, I'm saying consciousness is more fundamental than energy, it's more fundamental than matter, more fundamental than time and space. And so, and it's quantized, it comes in quantums of consciousness. And a quantum of consciousness I call an existence particle, because that's just the attribute of existence. And an existence particle, because it can't have any matter, space, or energy, or time, it simply comes into the existence and vanishes. No time, no space, it just comes into existence and vanishes. But, and it's that contrast between existence and non-existence that gives it a quantum of consciousness. It knows what it is by knowing what it's not. So it knows its existence, it exists because it knows non-existence. They form moments of time when two of them bond. One exists, one has vanished. They flip. The existence transfers to the vanished one, it becomes existing, and the existing one vanishes because it's transferred to existence. The oscillation between existence and non-existence forms moments of time. Then you have passage of time. I'm just going to skip ahead to voids and singularities, and say that in black holes, the singularity is a point in which space and time can't move any further. You can't move, and general relativity, the equations break down, and I'm saying they break down because at that point, space and time go back into, they vanish at that point. And gravity is actually the flow of space-time into these singularities. The Big Bang is the opposite type of singularity. It's where the universe expands. Space and time emerge from those points. What I'm proposing in the human brain is that the sense of self is the integrator of all the different functions of the brain, all the different systems, the auditory system, the visual system. The sense of self is that which organizes and integrates all them all into a single experience. But experience is not consciousness. And I propose that consciousness comes, and this is, I don't know how, maybe through microtubules, a void forms in the brain.
Yes.
And the void, from that void, existence particles emerge. The sense of self perceives these existence particles. So the sense of self has contact with existence or perceives existence, and that's how this human consciousness. And that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Wow. Okay, that's worthy of a wow, I think.
Yeah, okay, great. Right? Like, well,
no, that's great.
Another moment.
Yeah.
I'll say that when existence particles vanish, they don't really vanish. They go back to a transcendent reality, which is beyond space and time of the universe.
Yeah.
And in that transcendent reality, you can think of it as a soul.
Sorry to just interrupt. I'm so sorry. Is existron your term?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Just a figment of my imagination.
Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
But I believe it's a foundation for everything. Time,
Right.
space, energy, and matter.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So an atom is comprised of many existtrons.
Yeah.
But when they go back to the transcendent reality, all of their individual souls merge into one soul. Souls can merge. So an atom has its own soul. Likewise, trees, birds, all these animals and so on, they all have their own soul, and humans have souls. And through meditation, it's possible to go back into the void, experience our soul, go back into the transcendent reality, the infinite state from which everything came from.
So if anybody's interested in finding out more about this, check out The Architecture of the Universe by Richard Bloom, and it's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
There you go, free plug.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
And now, Conference Director Stuart Hameroff talks about what's next for him as he retires from anesthesiology.
The big new thing for me, anyway, is astrobiology and astroconsciousness. We actually had a talk by my friend and colleague Dante Loretta at the last 2 years ago, and Dante was in charge of a NASA mission to the asteroid Bennu, and this was a 20-year project. It was 7 years from liftoff to return. They sent this thing out into the solar system, a rendezvous with this asteroid Bennu that they had selected, and circled it for about a year, picked the landing spot, and on one fateful day it came down and scooped up some stuff and brought it back. And the idea was that this was going to be organic molecules that would explain or at least have a clue to the origin of life. And sure enough, it has a lot of organic molecules, polyaromatic rings that are just like what makes up a lot of organic chemistry and what we are. And also these weird things called nanoglobules that look like little micelles or eggs maybe even, which are fluorescent, so they have aromatics inside. So we're going to be analyzing that. And so Dante, while he was waiting for the probe to return with these molecules, or whatever it was, began to worry about what he had promised NASA, that he would find something about the origin of life. And he started to think about it, and it's pretty hard to fathom why life just started for no reason. And he got the idea, well, maybe there were feelings there. Maybe consciousness was there first, as some Eastern philosophy people think, panpsychists think, and Roger Penrose thinks with his objective reduction ideas. And so he wondered if anybody had published anything like that, and he came across an article that I had written in 2017, The Quantum Origin of Life, How the Brain Evolved to Feel Good, which claimed that in the primordial soup at the origin of life, there were these Penrose OR moments that led to little Bing, what I called Bing moments that had experience, most of which would be random, but occasionally some would be pleasurable. And basically I suggested that these molecules optimized pleasure. They reorganized themselves so they could have that little bit of pleasure again. Because what else would motivate a molecular system or even a simple creature to do anything? You know, the standard genetic approach is that there was, feelings and consciousness didn't come along till eons later, maybe even fairly recently with brains and with language and tool making. And I thought that, well, simple creatures would have to be conscious, and even paramecium must be conscious. Otherwise, why would they do all that stuff? There were no genes back then. Back in the primordial sleep, there was no brains, and yet they did all this stuff for millions, billions of years. So I thought, they must have. The Penrose mechanism allows you to say that there was experience back then. And that made more sense to me than they did all this for homeostasis or none of the explanations make any sense, other than they do it because if you go to any laboratory studying animals, whatever they do, they're doing it for reward, to feel good or to avoid feeling bad, and the carrot and the stick, and that's still how we behave more or less. I mean, we defer our gratification, but it's still gratification. We still want to optimize things. We put up, we kind of put ourselves through school or do this or that to get more pleasure later. So I think it's still our main motivation, and I thought it made a lot of sense. And Dante agreed, and so we're looking for signs of life and consciousness in these molecules that we're now studying. And how we do that is look for the kind of coherent oscillations that Anirban has found in microtubules, including what he calls triplets of triplets. And this is, I think, a great discovery that within the microtubules, every 3 orders of magnitude, you have these resonance conductances that have a pattern that are 3 peaks, and each peak has 3 peaks, so triplets of triplets. So it's very exciting, and I've retired from anesthesiology as of just before the conference, and I'll be working as a research professor in astrobiology for the coming future. And I look forward to working with Dante and Anirban, who's going to be analyzing a lot of these to look for signs of life and consciousness. So in the meantime, while we were waiting for this, there's a molecule that came from a meteorite in 1969. It landed in Australia. And there are a lot of samples from the meteorite. Of course, anything that crashes, you have to worry about contamination from earthly things. But they found one particular molecule that's like a branching tree or bush, where all the branches have these clusters of aromatic rings, which is where we think consciousness can happen, and upon which life depends, because they give rise to quantum effects, which I think are necessary. And so it's a 2-dimensional picture of this molecule, and it's been published for decades. I've seen it many times. Anyway, nobody's really figured out what it means, if anything. But we sent it to Anirban and said, Dante and I sent it to Anirban and asked him if he could model it in 3D and see what it looks like. At least we'd have a 3D picture of it. So he did that, and it folded on a super-duper computer that involved a lot of time in processing it. It folded into a kind of a peanut-shaped cigar, so that was cool. But then when he did a bunch of them, they lined up end to end, and so to make these filaments. And then when he made more of them, he got a bunch of the filaments, and the filaments aligned in parallel with a slight offset. I said, "Wow, this is beginning to look like the wall of a microtubule." And then when he looked at it from above, it was curved. So it looks like this molecule, which came from who knows where, way back when, certainly before life on Earth, had some kind of blueprint for a microtubule, which is mind blowing. I mean, it's way more than I would have even hoped for. But then to make it even better, he simulated the molecule's dynamical vibrations, and found a triplet of triplet pattern. So we're just trying to deal with this and understand it. It kind of smacks of what is sometimes called intelligent design in the evolution business, which is usually taken to mean God, started all off. I certainly don't go that far, but it could be that this molecule evolved itself, or evolved, perhaps not the best word, but developed itself to optimize pleasure even way back then, wherever it came from, or maybe even in the meteor before it crashed. So it suggests that maybe microtubules, which have been thought to have come from a symbiotic event from spirochetes, although that theory has been shot down now, so we don't really know where they came from. And in fact, in the intelligent design argument, tubulin and microtubules are often cited as an example for intelligent design, because the tubulin, the protein, evolved so it could be part of a microtubule. So as somebody said, why would a brick evolve for a skyscraper without any knowledge of the skyscraper, which is a pretty good question. But so here we have the possibility that microtubules are actually something even more primitive, maybe even at the origin of life itself. But it seems to require some kind of design. What I call it, at the moment, we're calling it conscious design, because proto consciousness could have been involved for this to happen. So. We're still trying to figure that out. We're going to be looking for more of these molecules in the samples from Bennu. We're going to be doing tests on them to look for more triplets of triplets and dynamics, and whatever kind of quantum optical effects we can see, and whatever we see, we will then try to anesthetize to see if they are inhibited by anesthetics proportional to their potency in anesthetizing you or me, which would go a long way to, I think, to suggest that the consciousness is fundamental to the universe, and these molecules have been here a long, long time, from who knows when, I don't know.
I wonder if it could be, I don't know, I could be way off, but let's try, that somehow there is some kind of platonic form of the microtubule. It is some sort of fundamental archetypal structure of something like that, and from that we get this.
It could be, and I've asked Roger about that. I've been trying to explain this to him, what we found and so forth, and whether the platonic form might be some kind of geometry of the universe. A lot of people, I mean, Roger started this idea off decades ago, but a lot of people now are talking about deeper geometry and beneath the Planck scale, and Don Hoffman's made a big deal about this, and Nassim Haramein and all these, and maybe they're right, but it's really based on Roger's idea that there's some platonic geometry or some structure or something embedded deep in the universe that seems to guide us or guide things or guide consciousness and guide life itself. And the microtubules may be their vessels or vehicles. And I think actually life is the vehicle for consciousness.
Right. Okay. It has to be something, doesn't it? I mean, otherwise, what,
Yeah, I mean, it's even harder to define life. People say, well, okay, define consciousness. And I say, well, there was once I tell an apocryphal story. There was once a conference on consciousness, decided, well, we need to define it on the first day, then we'll go on the rest of the week and explain it. And they were still arguing about the definition of consciousness at the end of the week. The same problem holds for life. Everybody says, well, we solved the problem of life. No, we haven't. We still don't know what it is. People describe it as functional explanations of, metabolism, homeostasis, adaptation, blah, blah, blah. But it's functions. They're not its essence. It's not what it is. It's what it does. And similarly, we have that problem for life. And then the vitalists came along and said there's some mysterious life force. They were kind of shoved aside. But Schrodinger in 1935, in his book What is Life, suggested a quantum vitalism, a quantum coherence, and then Froelich formalized that a little bit. And then Anirban discovered it in microtubules, in a quantum coherence. And then everybody's been saying for so long, well, the brain's too warm, wet, and noisy for quantum effects. That's bullshit. Pardon me, because life is not a monolithic slab. If you look within it, you find all different solubility parameters. For example, where anesthesia acts specifically selectively to block consciousness is a nonpolar region shielded from the water and coherent, so it gets rid of the warm and the noise by coherence, and forms a sequestered adiabatic. That is to say, there's no heat transfer into it or out of it, a realm where quantum effects can happen deep within our biology. So I think that's what's going on.
So 30 years of TSC, 31 years. What's happening next year?
Next year, we're going to be in Barcelona in July, having our conference the week preceding the Festival of Consciousness that's held every year in Barcelona, run by Javi Ginesta, who was here at our conference. And so it'll be part of a week-long consciousness event in Barcelona. And he's been doing that there for a few years. But before that, this summer, we're going to have a conference, follow-up from last year, at California Institute of Human Sciences. And the first one was called Neuroscience Needs a Revolution to Understand Consciousness. And this one will include, we haven't shorten the name enough yet, but will include neuroscience and evolution. So revolution and evolution is one aspect of it, and it'll be in August in Encinitas on the beach, where it's very cool and nice. And then Barcelona in 23, and then maybe again Encinitas in that summer. Then 2 more years, we'll presumably be back in Tucson if I'm still around, or even if I'm not.
The first time I came to TSC was in 2004 to research a project on consciousness and reality that would eventually become the Consciousness Chronicles DVD series. And one of the first people I met was Dan Dennett, whose work I'd heard of, but I was not greatly familiar with. And thankfully, Dan agreed to do an interview, and we met bright and early one morning outside the Leo Rich Theatre at the Conference Center in downtown Tucson. And I remember I was feeling a bit nervous, but as always, Dan was gracious and very forthcoming. So here, as our modest tribute, is that interview from 20 years ago with one of the giants of American philosophy and a true gentleman, Dan Dennett.
I'm Daniel Dennett. I'm a university professor at Tufts University and a director of the Center for Cognitive Studies there. I'm a philosopher by training.
Okay. And in the general sort of pantheon of philosophy and, say, consciousness studies, could you sort of talk about what your position would be somewhere in there?
Well, I'm a materialist, and I guess I'm fairly notorious among materialists for saying that the self is not like an organ in the brain, and of course it's not an immaterial soul. It's a virtual machine that's built in our brains by enculturation, by growing up, learning. So one time I was interviewed for an Italian newspaper, and the headline on the story was perfect. I've used it ever since to express my view. I said, "Sì, abbiamo un'anima, ma è fatta di tanti piccoli robot." Yes, we have a soul, but it's made of lots of tiny robots. And basically that's my view. Your brain is a bunch of tiny robots, 100 billion and more, and not a one of them is conscious, not a one of them knows who you are or cares, but the concerted activity of all those little robotic cells produces virtual machines, large, relatively permanent structures that shape how the whole person responds to everything that comes along. Our memories are stored in these connections between these little robots, and all of our attitudes, our loves, our hates, our thoughts, our dreams, it's all simply a function, a very complicated function, of these little robotic cells in action.
So is it fair to say perhaps at some point that these robots are creating an illusion of something? Is it sensible?
Yeah. The word illusion is problematic for many people because it usually means something bad. But anybody who's familiar with computers knows that it's also a good meaning. The user illusion, the desktop, the fact that you can click and drag with your mouse. This is a benign illusion, and there's an important sense in which what these little robots in your brain in effect create is a benign illusion. It's the brain's user illusion for itself. The brain is unbelievably complicated, and most of what goes on in the brain doesn't need to be, as it were, monitored by the brain. But the brain has to keep track of many things, including some of the things that are going on inside it. And to do this, it has ways of filtering out information and building structures that can then inform other structures. And this creates a sort of multifarious user illusion inside the brain. And who's the victim of the illusion? The brain itself. It's its own victim.
So we can say that this brain exists, and this illusion exists as a result of adaptation. It's something that's evolved from single cell to...
Yeah. Actually, that's a good question. The extent to which the structures that account for consciousness are evolved genetically, that is, are passed on through the genome, and the extent to which they're learned culturally, they're inculcated by enculturation, by growing up in the world, that's a very interesting question, and I hold a rather extreme view on this. I say that the virtual machine of human consciousness is, to an astonishing degree, culture-born. That is, you're not born with it, It's something that you learn to do. The same way you learn your language. I mean, you're not born knowing English or French or Italian, and you're not born with the virtual machine of consciousness. This is something that has to develop.
So how has consciousness arisen then? At what point can we say humans became, is there a point, is there a line somehow we can understand?
As usual in evolution, there's no sharp line. Everything happens by gradual steps with lots of false starts and backslidings. And I wouldn't even dream of putting in a date here, but I think the development of language is actually crucial. Not because consciousness is just talking to yourself, although a lot of it is, in effect, talking to yourself, but because the way in which language restructures the brain makes possible all sorts of recursive, reflective, self-involving cycles to be created. And without language, it's very hard to see how that could really get started. So I think, for instance, that the mind of a chimpanzee is just impoverished almost beyond imagination compared to the mind of a normal human being. And in fact, if a human being, organically normal, were raised in complete social isolation, which of course would be an outrageous, unforgivable thing ever to do, that human being would not have a human mind like yours and mine. That would be much more like an ape mind, and very different.
So we're suggesting that consciousness and the brain, so that we would say the human brain has the capacity for consciousness, but it's not guaranteed.
That's right.
What gives us consciousness is simply acculturation.
Yeah. When you get a new computer, it's got an operating system on it, but you could put a different operating system on it, and consciousness is a sort of operating system, and it's not installed in the factory. In effect, it's something that you have to acquire.
Okay, so that sort of leads me to the question of reality, and then clearly reality is at this point part of the conscious function. I mean, our understanding of what is real really comes to us through our conscious senses or faculty or what. But if you're suggesting that consciousness is a almost afterthought grafted on in some sense, does that mean that reality is very fragile at some level?
It doesn't mean that reality is fragile. It means that the conception of reality is fragile. I don't think there's any sense in which, I'm going to wait till this person goes by.
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't dare
Yeah, right. No, yeah. It's not that reality is fragile. It's that the conception of reality is fragile. Chimpanzees and dolphins don't really have a conception of reality. They don't need one. They're living in the world, and they're not conceiving of much of anything. I don't think they're just looking for the next meal and the next mate. It's only our species that has doubt. We invented doubt. Skepticism is a human invention. That is explicit skepticism. If you look around the animal world, you can see animals that are anxious, worried. You know, do I dare go into this dark place? Is there food over there? Can I escape along this route? And so forth. They scurry about looking quite concerned. But they can't really ask themselves those questions. And if you can't ask yourself the questions, then you can't really be a skeptic. You can be upset. You cannot know what to do, but you can't reflectively be a skeptic. And that's a human invention. And science and philosophy is just part of the flourishing of that skepticism.
So can we say that, from your point of view, that there is in a sense an objective reality, that there is a material world in which we live, that we have adapted to be able to perceive it, we interact with it at a physical level, and that's kind of it?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to say that?
Yes, if you can.
Yeah, right, yes. My metaphysical view is actually very mundane. I think there's the physical reality of the world and the solar system and the rest of the universe. And on this planet, evolution has taken place over the last 3 or 4 billion years. And we're just one of the fruits of that evolution. And we have a we're the one species on the planet so far that has a conception of what it is and who it is and how it got there. And once you arrive at that reflective, wondering state, then all sorts of wonderful things happen. I mean, art and science flourish, and philosophy too. And wild and extravagant views about the nature of reality arise quite appropriately and get batted about. And the view that I hold is the one that strikes me as having the most going for it today.
Why do we sort of persistently come back to a sense of some hidden intelligence, whatever you want to call it? You know, if you're an artist, it might be the inspiration that seems to come from nowhere and suddenly you have a painting.
Yeah.
Or if you're religiously inclined, it's a sense of communion with some kind of god, or the gods if you're in a polytheistic society. Again and again and again, it's almost like impossible to leave this behind, that there's some sort of other consciousness interacting with us.
And I think those are a very good reason why that sense of an author or of a intelligent designer somewhere is there, and that is, there's a lot of intelligent design in this world. There's a lot of fantastic design. Every organism on this planet is just breathtakingly well engineered. Not perfectly, and it's the imperfections that give us the hints. But I think for as long as there have been human beings, and maybe even longer, that is, it may go back to our hominid ancestors, somebody like Homo habilis, the handyman, a principle that seemed obvious was, it takes a big, fancy, smart thing to make a stupid thing. You never see a pot making a potter. You never see a horseshoe making a blacksmith. It's always the other way around. And I think this principle seems so obvious to people that they find it almost impossible even to conceive of its negation. But that's just what Darwin did. Darwin showed us that no, we can have a bubble-up theory of creativity. We don't need a trickle-down theory of creativity. A unintelligent, mechanical, motiveless process can create all the design we see, including the designers that now are our model of a designer, that is the artists and engineers and writers and other creators of artifacts. The creators of artifacts, the intelligent, foresighted creators of artifacts, are a very recent evolutionary development. They are only maybe tens of thousands or 100,000 years old, but they then become the model for all design that we see in the biosphere. And I think the other reason that we find this idea of a sort of hidden designer everywhere is that the design does all happen, in effect, backstage. Evolutionary design happens over eons, and it's the selective pruning of huge excesses of procreation. And you can't sort of see it focused in any one place. Over the eons, the giraffe's necks get longer, but you never see any one moment where they're being elongated. It's a statistical outcome. And artistic creation is actually very similar. There's a lot of churning in the mind that is beneath the level of the user illusion, so we don't get to see how it's going on. It's like magic. Wonderful ideas just bubble up, and we don't know where they come from. And when you don't know where they come from, it's very convenient and easy to say, well, there must be some sort of agency in there that's doing it. It's the muse, it's God, it's my alter ego, it's not me. This is a very natural illusion, but that's just false. That's you that are doing it, but it's the part of you that you don't have access to.
The scientists these days are talking an awful lot about quantum, and we've spoken to
Stu Hameroff,
and he made a couple of quite, I don't know, fairly, I guess what might be called controversial points. But I suppose I'm still struggling to understand quantum, but probably will take forever. But at some level, he's suggesting that written. To what extent does our current understanding of material science, is this good forever? Is it good into the future, or are we going to start to perhaps challenge that with new other things start to come in and maybe undermine what is our current way of thinking? How can we be sure where we are?
I'm no expert on quantum physics, but I have yet to see any suggestions or speculations or hypotheses coming from people who know about quantum physics that has anything to do with consciousness that I think is worth discussing. I think it's sheer fantasy, and there's nothing to it. Now, I might be wrong, but if anybody tells you that we need quantum spookiness in order to explain some phenomenon that's been observed by neuroscientists or psychologists, no, not at all. We don't. You notice that they don't run around saying, we can't explain digestion or metabolism or self-repair or growth without invoking quantum physics. Why? We've got those biological functions well in hand. We know how they work pretty well. And we don't have to have any revolutions in science to explain reproduction or self-repair. And reproduction and self-repair are exquisitely reflexive, recursive. They're extraordinarily devious and incredibly complicated processes. And so is consciousness. It's the same kind of thing. It's made from the same sorts of building blocks. I haven't seen any reason to suppose that we have to swoop down into the world of the quantum physicist in order to understand consciousness. It fascinates me that so many people have trouble with the theory of consciousness, which says it's made up out of parts that aren't conscious. If you have a theory of color and you say, well, the reason things are colored is they're made of lots of little red and green atoms, how do they get red and green? That's not a theory of color at all. And a theory of consciousness has to break consciousness down into parts that aren't conscious and explain how the interaction of those non-conscious parts can create consciousness. That's not explaining consciousness away, it's explaining consciousness, same as you would explain what color is. So when people say, well, Dennett says he's not conscious, that's preposterous. I go to great lengths to say, of course I'm conscious. It's just that consciousness isn't what you think it is. There's a wonderful book by Lee Siegel on Indian street magic. And in that book, he says, I tell my friends I'm writing a book on magic, and they say, real magic? And by real magic, they mean thaumaturgical acts, miracles, necromancy, and so forth. He says, no, not real magic. Stagecraft, card tricks, sleight of hand. In other words, real magic is the sort of magic that isn't real. And the kind you can actually do, that's not real magic. And I think a lot of people feel just that way about consciousness. Real consciousness is inexplicable. If you've got an explanation of it, then that's not real consciousness. And there's people in print that saying, the more Dennett explains to me how consciousness is a matter of processes in the brain, the more I think he's just saying consciousness isn't real. No, that's what consciousness is.
And electricity and integrated information. Well, maybe. Distant clocks. Triplets of triplets.
My whole quantum self appeared standing next to your equipment.
Bearing a secret in the hollow tube, a dance of charge, forming a symphony, just like guitar strings.
5 nomadic years of travel, 6 continents, 40 countries.
Why does it take you forever to do the dishes? Well, evolution is selecting for slower and slower individuals.
For every query a chance to show the depths of knowledge that I bestow. But let it be known with a humble heart that I too am but a crafted art. Bound
little star looking down on Earth, I think I would be questioning whether it was worth God putting his creation, man, in that place of trust. Eden's garden, green and lush, oasis in the dust.
Man grew and bred and spoiled the land. He didn't seem to care, spewing dust and bombs and fumes almost everywhere.
I am a conscious being, walking the shores of life. In the shadow of thoughts and dreams, my heart resonates a smile of dreams. That's all, folks. Thank you.
They're made of meat.
Meat?
There's no doubt about it. We picked several from different parts of the planet and took them on our recon vessels, trod them all the way down. They're completely meat.
That's impossible. What about the radio signals?
They use the radio waves to talk, but the signals don't come from them. The signals come from machines.
Okay, yeah, but like, so who made the machines?
They made the machines. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Meat made the machines.
That's ridiculous. How can meat make a machine? You're asking me to believe in sentient meat, Stuart? Come on.
I'm not asking you, Claire. I'm telling you. These creatures are the only sentient races in this sector, and they're completely made out of meat.
No brain?
Oh, there's a brain, all right. It's just that the brain is made out of meat.
Okay, Stuart, we're supposed to talk to meat?
That's the idea. That's the message they're sending out by radio.
Okay, so they actually do talk then. They have things like words, ideas, concepts? The meat has those things?
Oh yes, except they do it with meat.
Wait. Just a few seconds ago, you told me that they use radio.
They do, but what do you think is in the radio? They talk by flapping their meat at each other. They can even sing through their meat.
Oh my God, singing, squirting, meat? That is altogether too much, Stuart. This is like, I expected this conference to be kind of weird, but like this is really, really off the deep end. And the ones who have been aboard our vessels, the ones you have probed, you're sure they won't remember?
They'll be considered crackpots if they do. We went into their heads and smoothed out their microtubules so that we're just a dream to them.
A dream to meet. How strangely appropriate that we should be meat's dream.
Imagine how unbearable, how unutterably cold the universe would be if we were alone. Thank you.
Stuart!
So that wraps our fourth program of Consciousness Central 2024. I hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to join me for our fifth and final program, which is a special on the Orchestrated Objective Reduction Theory of Consciousness, otherwise known as ORCO-R, as proposed by Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. And I'll be talking to Stuart about the latest with ORCO-R and what's been going on there, any progress that's been made. I'll also talk to his chief collaborator, quantum scientist Anirban Bandyopadhyay, who's shown that quantum effects do indeed take place within microtubules, the substructures of neurons, which has great implications for ORCO-R. And we talk to neuroscientist Santosh Helikar about what might be the very first consciousness detector that uses quantum effects. Until then, this is Nick Day saying thanks for watching and bye for now.